Hey guys, Andre here. So I asked your Super Mario 3D World related questions, and boy did you guys deliver. Give me hundreds to choose from. Now I don't have time to answer all of them, so I'm going to go through as many as I can though in a lightning round and just answering as many questions as possible. As you can probably tell, we're not doing anything particularly fancy here, unless you consider the Zelda poster to be fancy, which I kind of do. It's pretty awesome. Also, I can only answer questions specifically up to the end of World 2. So I might be able to talk in general terms about a few things, but anything specific is going to be about those two worlds. And with that, let's get started. So first up we have Luke on Facebook who asks, how does the game feel compared to Mario Galaxy and other games in the series? So, not surprisingly, it feels closest to Super Mario 3D Land, being, kind of a pseudo-sequel, even if there's not any, story-relaed ties or anything. The controls are very similar, the layout of the levels feels similar, where the camera angles are mostly static. So yeah, it feels similar, but it's still very much its own thing as well. So it doesn't feel like just the same game with more levels. It really does feel like its own thing, but based on 3D Land. With that said, there are a few nods to other Mario games in the series here and there, including Mario Galaxy. But it's it's still very much a 3D Land type game. Next up, Tiffany on Twitter asks, here's one: how is using the Koopa Shell in the game? So yeah, as I put on one of our analysis, you can ride in Koopa Shells now, and actually trying it out. It's actually in one of our videos we posted, so you can go check that out. It's the World 1-2 one. So it works really well, actually. Better than it did in New Super Mario Bros., where in that game it was a power-up, as opposed to this game being an item. So basically, you can just kick a Koopa Shell, a Koopa out of their shell, grab the shell, and when you're holding it, you can press, I think, a trigger. I forget what it is on the Wii Remote, but you can press a trigger on the gamepad. Your character just hops into the Koopa Shell, and you can ride it around. Now the controls are kind of limited in it. You can control the direction. It's very loose. It takes like a little while for your shell to go in the direction, like it curves on a very gradual turn. So you're not going to be doing anything any pinpoint precision. But it kind of adds to the zaniness of using it, because you're bouncing off walls all the time, and it's just a lot of fun to use. And it's super easy to hop out of it too, unlike the power-up in New Super Mario Bros. So it works well, and you'll see it throughout the game. It doesn't pop up extremely frequently, but when it does, it's always fun to use. Next up, we have Chris on Facebook who asks, how do the controls feel? Is it about the same as Super Mario 3D Land in that respect? So, as I kind of mentioned before, yeah, it feels very similar to Mario 3D Land. It still even has the sticky controls, where the sticky 8-way movement, where basically if you press anywhere near one of the 8 primary directions, your character's going to lock onto that track. With that said, there is some room for a more gradual, you don't have to go in one of the 8 directions, but for the most part, it kind of shoves you into one of them. Only if you rotate the control stick slow enough can you adjust off that trajectory. So yeah, it feels similar. That I feel like I just spent way too long describing how the movement works. If you play 3D Land, you know how it works. The jump controls are similar. Really, the game, the core controls are all very similar. The biggest, distinction comes in the terms of having the different playable characters that all feel a little bit different. I guess similar to Luigi in 3D Land, which I believe he jumped higher and kind of slipped around a little bit more in that game. This game, he still jumps higher, but he doesn't have the slippery feel that he did in that game. And the other characters like Peach being able to hover, and Toad moving faster, it just helps make the game feel a little bit different. Though Mario himself feels very true to how he did in 3D Land. Amelia on Facebook asks, what controls are better? Using Nunchuck and Wii Remote, or just Wii Remote sideways? So, at all these preview events, I've been using only the Wii Remote, and it worked fine for the most part. I didn't have any trouble at all at those events. With that said, now that I've played the game with the gamepad, where I've been using the control stick, even though you can use the D-pad too, I kind of find it hard to go back to the D-pad. The control stick works really well, because it has a sticky controls. It's not a huge distinction between the two, but I do like the general feel of the control stick better. So. But if you're using Wii Remotes, it's going to be fine. And you can even use, as I posted on Facebook a few days ago, you can use a nunchuck as well. So you can connect the nunchuck with the Wii Remote and get very Mario Galaxy-like controls with the game. So it works really well. And the game also supports the Wii Classic Controller Pro, or rather, I'm sorry, it supports the Wii U Pro Controller as well as the Wii Classic Controller Pro. It does not support, however, the original Wii Classic Controller, which makes no sense to me. There's no good reason why it shouldn't support it, but At least it supports almost everything else, so that's cool. Falcon on Facebook asks, how much do you get to use the Wii U Gamepad touchscreen? So, you can use it a lot, because at any point in the game, you just touch on the screen and a cursor appears, both on the gamepad and the TV. And it'll highlight like invisible objects if you run your finger across them. So, it's generally, well, not necessarily worth your while, but you know, it can be useful to run your finger along the screen at points too. God, I'm running out of breath doing this. Jesus, this marathon's not a great idea. But yeah, so you can run along your finger to find invisible blocks or invisible things that you can activate, and sometimes you'll even see them shimmering in the environment. Or if you do like a ground pound, that'll also cause them to be exposed. So if you see something like shimmering, you can run your finger along it to make sure it's actually there. On top of that, there are a few other things too in the game that involves using your finger or using your hand. And such as one level in World 1 where tapping on blocks on the gamepad causes them to pop out of the walls. And that's how you create these platforms you can use to cross gaps. It works well, and I'll probably post a video of it at some point. But it doesn't pop up that often throughout the game. There's only a few instances, level-specific instances where you'll use a gamepad for those purposes. Though, as I mentioned, you can always run your finger along it to find invisible things. And if so that's something you could potentially end up doing throughout the game. It just depends on how often you want to do that. While I catch my breath, Mark on Twitter asks, is the game completely controllable with a remote and nunchuck in single player, or is the gamepad obligatory? So yeah, any control scheme you can play the game with single player on. The only catch is some levels do, like the one I just mentioned, where you're pulling the blocks out of the wall. Some of them do require you to use the gamepad, or have the gamepad with you, to play with. So for the most part, if it's single player, you can use any controller, but some levels do require the gamepad. But again, that's a very small amount. John on Facebook asks, how many hits does it take to defeat Charging Chucks this time around? Well, I literally just posted a video of this actually. In Super Mario World, as I recall, it took 3 hits. This time it'll only take 2. One to knock off their helmet and another to take them out. So some of you may be disappointed about that, because they were pretty mean in Mario World. Like, they were a kind of pain to deal with, and this time they're not that bad. That's still more hits than most enemies. But to put it into perspective, the Super Mario World style Goombas also require 2 hits. So, in that sense, yeah, they do seem like they've been nerfed a little bit, which is a little bit unfortunate, but, it's not that big of a deal, and they can be a pain when they team up on you, such as in that clip, there were 2 of them in the video I posted. In that case, they weren't that particularly difficult either, but, they can be when in numbers. Adrian on Facebook asks, what does a hidden hole in the grass structure of World 1 contain? So on the world map, as I pointed out in our analysis, there's like a hole in the wall. And if you go inside it, I'm trying to remember, I should have double checked this. I'm pretty sure it's like a toad house, basically. Like, there's an item in there that you get from a toad. It wasn't anything particularly special. But yeah, if you just walk into the hole and press A, you'll go right inside. And as I recall, it was like a toad house. Or it may have been a house where you get a stamp from. There are also structures on the map that'll give you a stamp. So I forget which one, it's one of those 2. So nothing super exciting, but there you go. Luigi64 on Twitter asks, what kind of file screen does the game have? How many files? The file screen is pretty not remarkable. It's probably closest to things we've seen in the new Super Mario Bros. Games, or even 3D Land. I forget how exactly it looked in those games, but it's just three files next to each other, so nothing special. And you can copy and delete files as you can in most Mario games. Dennis J on Twitter asks, in terms of gameplay, is 3D World closer to 3 Land or Mario 64 / the Galaxy games? So I can't answer this already, but I know some of the directors at E3 mentioned the game has a little bit more of an open Mario 64 feel to it. At least I think they mentioned that, because of the camera controls this time. With that said, it definitely feels more like 3D Land. I don't really feel much of a Galaxy or 64 influence here. The camera controls are pretty limited, so it doesn't really change how the game feels that much, and you don't even have to use them for the most part. So the default control or default camera works fine, and it feels definitely more like 3D Land. Jordan on Facebook asks, what are your opinions on the first 2 worlds graphics-wise? I think the game looks good. It looks sharp. It has a very pleasant visual style to it. It basically looks how you'd picture like if they brought Mario World to 3D. I think it looks really good. I have really no complaints about the art style. I think it looks a lot better than the new Super Mario Bros. Games, which have like a plasticky feel to it. This game just feels, you know, it just looks better. It's hard to pinpoint exactly why. It just has, I feel like it has a less plasticky look, more colorful, a little bit more organic look to it. You know, it might still have a little bit of that plastic tint to it, but the lighting is just way better. Just everything, it just looks really good. So yeah, I mean, no complaints. It's a very solid looking game. It's not gonna blow minds or anything, but it's pleasant enough. Deep Pro of Mario on Twitter asks, is there a story progression through the first and second world? Does it have a variety of difficulty? Please avoid spoilers. Alright, well, I'm not really, there's really nothing I can spoil that much in the first 2 worlds, besides what, you know, what they showed in trailers and whatnot. So there's, in terms of story progression, there's like very little story in the game. We've already seen the bulk of the first cutscene through the trailers, and there's, you know, not much there. It's, you know, Bowser literally just kidnaps these, seven sprites or Sprixies, and then you just go level to level and, you know, take on a boss in the castle and you rescue a Sprixie. So yeah, there's really no story development. In fact, even 3D Land had more story than this, because it had the between cutscene or between level like images at least, where, you know, you would see something happening. So yeah, there's not much going on here. You know, at least in the first 2 worlds specifically. And the variety of difficulty. I wouldn't say there's a variety of difficulty so much as it just, you know, very gradually ramps up in difficulty. It's, you know, if you play the Mario game, then you know what to expect and how it works in terms of getting tougher. Diego on Facebook asks, which character will you be using the most? So I started off using Mario primarily just because he's my go-to guy, but then I started branching out, and I find that Luigi is kind of my go-to person now. Between Luigi and Princess, I think that's how it was in Mario 2 for me too. You know, Luigi's extra height is great, and Peach's ability to float comes in very helpful. Although she doesn't float nearly as far as she did in Mario 2, so it's not that helpful, but it can be, you know, it's still better than nothing. Although her super slow running speed is kind of a slight drawback, and that's why I like using Luigi, because he does run at a pretty quick clip, and he can jump really high. Preston B on Facebook asks, are there any new power-ups or amazing levels we haven't seen yet? What do you think is the best level so far? So again, you know, I can't really talk that much about it, but yeah, there are definitely a lot of cool levels we haven't seen, and we haven't seen every power-up hasn't been shown yet. So there you go. Evan on Facebook asks, what does all the title screen days look like? Okay, so Evan on Facebook asks, what do all the tile screens look like? Because the tile screen has a few different times a day that it cycles through. Either every time you go to it, or whenever you just sit there. So yeah, there are, I mean, actually I wrote them down here. There's a sunset one, there's a rainy one, morning, and a day one. So there's 4 of them. You know, they look fine. It's cool, I guess, that cycles. You know, it doesn't change anything. Yeah, so, you know, they look fine, and the only things that change are the enemies around and the performances of the characters that do things, you know, on them. So yeah, it's you know, it's a nice little touch, but, you know, does it add anything? Kyle on Facebook asks, are most of the levels short or lengthy? So they actually vary quite a bit. Some levels are super short, some are quite long. It reminded me a little bit of Mario 3, except maybe with levels that are a little bit longer than that, you know, in general. But, you know, Mario 3 had levels that vary in length, and this kind of reminded me of that. So yeah, they come in all shapes and sizes, and, you know, lengths and whatever. Yeah, so I never, you know, it all felt well-paced. Nothing, you know, the variety just works really well. It's nice to get that, you know, it's nice not to have to go through every level that's always the same length as one another. Travis on Twitter asks, are certain collectibles like green stars and stamps only obtainable by using a certain character? You know, for the most part, no. You can get most collectibles, but there are a very few instances where a specific character is required. So I don't think I can say much more about it, but that is, you know, it's rare, but it does happen occasionally, if I'm remembering correctly. Ben on Facebook asks, how does a double cherry control? Does it do it well? So the double cherry, you know, gives you another, you know, doubles amount of character, or adds another character that you're controlling on screen. So you can end up with, you know, like 4 or 5 of them. And it controls well in the sense that, you know, they all control exactly, they all follow the exact inputs you're doing. The tricky thing is just keeping track of them all and, you know, making sure they can all avoid enemies or avoid getting damaged. You know, it works surprisingly well though. You'd think it'd be really confusing, and it can be a little bit, you know, a little bit confusing, but it never feels like cumbersome. It controls really well, and I was surprised by how much fun it is to have like there's an army of characters that all follow your exact inputs. It's cool. Person on Twitter asks, how's the music been so far? Any new catchy tunes that the public hasn't heard yet? Yeah, there's a ton of music in the game, so you definitely haven't heard anywhere close to all of it. And there's a lot of really catchy tunes. You know, I would say it's, you know, it's pretty typical for your Mario game. You know, it's similar to 3D Land in terms of, you know, bounciness. The actual music style itself actually does feel pretty distinct, and it does lend way to some pretty cool tracks. So I can't, you know, give too many thoughts on it until the review, but there is some really cool stuff they're doing in there. So it's a very pleasant sounding game. Malcolm on Facebook asks, are the levels in the worlds themed, or do they all have different themes like in Super Mario 3D Land? So, kind of. They feel like a little bit more themed than 3D Land. Like, you know, in the desert, you'll have some desert levels, but it also kind of goes off rails at points. Like, I can't remember anything specific, but you'll find levels that don't even have anything to do with the world theme, just, you know, kind of shoved in there. So yeah, it's not as true to each world's themes as like Super Mario World, or, you know, New Super Mario Bros. U, but it is a little bit more than 3D Land, so somewhere between the two. Serious on Facebook asks, are the Sprixies any help to you after you save them at the end of each world? Not really. It's maidens in Zelda, basically, or, you know, any collectible in a game. You get them and you move on, so not really. The Cake on Twitter asks, also, see any new power-ups that we haven't seen yet? Oh, I answered this, yes. Floris on Facebook asks, in World 2... Okay, Floris on Facebook asks, in World 2's map, there's a Super Mario World Goomba. What sort of stage is that? So yeah, as you'll see in the video I posted, the Charge and Chuck, the Goombas are basically just battle stages, kind of like Mario 3 or New Super Mario Bros. U. Except this time you have to beat those levels to get past to open up the levels beyond that enemy. So yeah, it's basically a forced battle stage, and so when you go into one, you just have to take on a few of those enemies, and then once you clear it, you're going on to the next place. And you'll get a green star for doing so, so it works out. McGill on Facebook asks, does backflipping and long jumping work as previous Mario games? Yep, they work the same way. You can backflip by holding crouch and jumping. You can also do a side flip, and you can do a long jump, which is, you know, still extremely useful at points. It's not as long. You don't long jump as far as you did like in Mario Galaxy, but it's still extremely useful. Ken on Facebook asks, amid speculation, does the game have any relation to Super Mario Bros. 2? You know, again, I can only talk about up to World 2, but, you know, there's nothing there tying it to Mario 2 aside from like cool references thrown in, like, you know, the doors I mentioned before, or the music that I posted a video of a few days ago of the character selection screen for Mario 2 is back. So, you know, it's more about little nods to previous Mario games as opposed to being, you know, tied to any of them. Nin Temple on Twitter asks, you want a question of fact? Okay, I'm not quite sure what that says there. Is there any vegetable pulling in the game? No, there aren't any vegetables. There's really no pulling up of anything. There are things in the environment you can pick up now, like Koopa Shells, or baseballs you can throw around, or, you know, we've seen things in the trailer too, like snowballs you can pick up and throw around. So, you know, there's not that much beyond that. It really is, you know, just picking things up, not plucking things from the ground. Ryan on Facebook asks, can you play the levels in any order? No. There are points where the path will branch off. You can tackle like either of the levels, but you do have to go in order basically. You know, at least through each. You know, at least take down one of those levels in a split path, which will then continue onward. Beyond those occasional splits, it's very linear. You can't choose any level you want. So. Emily on Facebook asks, are there any Easter eggs, such as possible future Cool Bits material in the first two worlds that you haven't shown us yet? There is actually. There is something that I don't think anyone's pointed out yet that I noticed first in World 1-3 maybe. So I don't know if I'll do a Cool Bits on it or if I'll do just a quick video showcasing it. But it's a very small thing, nothing to get excited about. And it kind of ties to something we've seen before, you know, both in this game as well as other games. So stay tuned for that. I'll cover it to some degree in the future. Charlie on Facebook asks, what are the enemies blocking your path in the world map all about? Okay, I just answered that. Yeah, they block your path. You have to beat them to move on. Master C on Twitter asks, does the mystery box stay there all the time or does it disappear after you go into it? So I posted a video a few days ago showing the mystery homes or mystery box levels that return from Super Mario 3D Land, but this time they work a little bit differently. So in 3D Land, you would get them through street passing, and there was like a challenge, like a 10-second challenge in each one. And this time there's still that 10-second challenge, but this time there's like several 10-second challenges like looped together. So for each one, you'll get a green star. But if you fail at any point, you have to start over from the beginning. But you will keep all the green stars you earned up to that point, which is cool. So yeah, once you finish a level, or if you fail or whatever, the mystery box will stay on that world map. You can revisit it, whenever you want. So it stays there unlike 3D Land. Because it's basically, even though it plays similar, its function is completely different in this game. Billy on Facebook asks, does this game feel separate from 3D Land, or does it feel like some additional levels with a few extra power-ups? So as I kind of talked about before, it definitely feels like its own thing. Although it is rooted in 3D Land gameplay, it doesn't feel like an expansion pack at all. Like, it feels more different to 3D Land than any of the new Super Mario Bros. Games to each other. So take that for what it's worth. And then he also asks, another Billy question, he also asks, does Luigi slip around a lot like the Lost Levels? I talked about this before. No, he functions like he does in Mario 2. So no slipping around. Save Doug Walking Dead on Twitter asks, what is the maximum amount of cherry clones you can have? I think it's basically what we see in the trailer, so 5 or 6 around there. It's possible that I didn't find all the cherries, so maybe you can go beyond that. But that's been my general experience, is 5 or 6 clones. Kyle on Facebook asks, is Luigi Brothers multiplayer? So yeah, I posted a video a few days ago showing off that there's now a Luigi version of the original Mario Brothers NES game, or arcade game, available on the title screen of Super Mario 3D World as soon as you start it. And it functions just like Mario Brothers did, except this time you play as Luigi. And it still supports 2 players. This time though, the second player controls another version of Luigi, but he looks like the Fire Luigi version, even though he doesn't actually have fire powers. But it's got the white and black, or the white and orange motif. I forget what his color scheme is exactly, but it looks like a fire version of Luigi. Harry on Twitter asks, does a catsuit work smoothly, or... Oh, I just lost my question. Okay, does a catsuit work smoothly, or does it take a while to get used to? Catsuit works great. I'll talk more about it in the review. But as I mentioned before, it's just a ton of fun to use. Like clambering up walls. Everything about it, for the most part, works great. It might have a few small issues with it, which I'll explore in the review. But for the most part, it's a very fun power-up, and the controls work really well for it. Poxon on Twitter asks, what buttons make the catsuit use its unique abilities? Claw attack, running up walls, mid-air diagonal, pounce thing, etc. I'm trying to remember offhand. I'm going off the gamepad controls, but it's going to be different on the Wii Remote. But, I think running up walls is basically controlled by holding run and just jumping at a wall, or taking one of those cat ramps to go up a wall. So as long as you hold run, you'll scamper up the wall. Slash attack is Y as well as like his diagonal aerial attack. Just press run in the air and he'll do it, which is, again, Y. And there's a few other things he can do, but that covers it for the most part. You can also kind of pounce or what's the word, like stalk around, like stalk a rabbit, for instance, by holding the crouch button, which is a trigger, and he'll pounce, walk around like a cat tracking its prey. And then you can dive after it by pressing Y if you're crouching at the same time. Whoa, alright, almost done here. Jeez, I did not realize how exhausting talking this much is. Even though I remember, it happens every time, but I always forget it somehow. Jay Kelly on Twitter asks, how many secrets are in the world maps? So unless they're really well hidden, and again, I'm only talking specifically about the first 2 world maps. Unless there's more really well hidden, there aren't that many. In the World War II map, you can see like a little 1-up on this little ledge you can't normally reach. But if you head to the other side, you can find a little pathway that takes you down to the waterfront or to the edge of the map, and you can walk along the rim of the world map to get the 1-up. Aside from that, there's like a few coins that pop up when you pass over certain areas of the map, and then there's like the bush in World 1 that I mentioned you can enter. There's really not that many secrets that I found. Unless they're, again, super well hidden, but I don't think they are. So there's a few small things there, which is cool, but nothing super surprising. Finally, Tom on Twitter asks, on a scale of 1 to 10, how is the game? Well, Tom, as you probably should know, I can't review the game until the review goes up, but this gives me a good segue, so thanks for asking, about our review, which will go up on November 19th, sometime in the morning Pacific time. I forget the exact time. So keep an eye out for our review on November 19th. I, can't tell you my impressions of the game much otherwise, but, it'll be a pretty in-depth review, so definitely keep an eye out for that. Yeah, definitely, we'll cover a lot of things about the game. And with that, we're done covering everything related to Super Mario 3D World, at least for these questions, so thanks for sending them in. If you have any more questions for, for Mario 3D World or just anything in general, make sure to send them in. You can send them in on our Twitter or Facebook pages at GameXplain. That's also a good place to keep up to date with everything we post. We post everything there, basically. Otherwise, keep an eye on GameXplain.com for much more on Super Mario 3D World and other things gaming too. Alright, thanks guys. Bye.